The things that fill up my day the most are calls themselves and the follow-up, creating content for webinars, for social media, doing outreach, trying to get myself plugged in the community, building that network, making those connections. The bulk of what I do day to day.
Nurses and nurse coaches, welcome back to the Nurse Coach Collective podcast. I'm your host, Heather. One of the things that I love most about nurse coaching is just how versatile this field truly is. Our graduates are out there doing incredible work in hospitals, in clinics, and communities, and in thriving private practices. And for those who build their own businesses, the possibilities are endless. If there is a population that you feel deeply called to serve, there is a way to leverage nurse coaching to create a practice that lights you up and makes a real difference. So to bring that to life today, I am joined by Ellen LeBleu, who is a health and wellness nurse coach who supports moms with littles who can't seem to find a minute for themselves. In her business, Renewal Wellness Coaching, she helps moms rediscover their energy, their time, and their freedom to fill up their own cups without the guilt. Because as Ellen always reminds us, taking care of yourself is taking care of your family. Ellen, I'm so excited for this conversation. It is coming at a very important moment in my life where I am both managing toddlerhood and getting ready to going through the newborn phase all over again. So very timely to have you join me here. Welcome. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
What brought you into nurse coaching to begin with? Was this like always the working with new moms and working with this population? Has that always been the flavor of nursing that you have been in?
Nope. My traditional nursing career was actually in the ICU for the most part. I did that until night shift, of course, the end of 2020. And then I had felt like I'd paid my dues and I switched to procedural nursing, where I actually was the manager of an IR department. And somewhere along the way, I found out about nurse coaching. That was probably 2 years ago. I didn't even know it existed, like most of you, like a niche within nursing. And I certainly wasn't planning on doing any. I wasn't ever like an L&D nurse or anything like that. That part of it kind of came from like a personal standpoint. I have 2 little girls myself. They are 3 and 1 as of tomorrow.
Yeah. Congrats. Almost.
The switch to motherhood specifically, as far as my coaching, came kind of after the decision to dive into nurse coaching specifically. And I literally found you guys on a Facebook ad.
So what happened for you in that moment of going through this trajectory inside of actually similar to my own, starting off in critical care, loading up on those night shifts, right? So looking for that next thing. What happened for you in that moment where the Facebook ad popped up? What was it that spoke to you?
I mean, at first I thought it was too good to be true. I don't remember what I was even doing or why I stopped to look at it, but something pulled me in regards to reshaping the way that we think about healthcare and not viewing it from the Band-Aid approach after the fact, but the wellness, hey, let's actually fix these things before they become what brought you to the ICU today kind of thing. And so I was just really pulled in by the idea of just working with people that actually want to make changes in their lives and not seeing them after they've already kind of dug themselves into a hole. Obviously not, I'm speaking in generalities, but, working with people that have the desire to change, the desire to be healthier, and the desire to make those lifestyle changes, because I feel like so many of the diseases that we see in the hospital today are just diseases of lifestyle. And so I was so intrigued by taking care of people in the community, and maybe let's not fill up the ICU. Let's talk to people when they're out and about in their daily lives and making those small changes. And then, I started the program. That was the beginning of 2024 and didn't really know how I wanted to specialize. And then I got pregnant shortly after I started. And so I was pregnant for most of the collective. And somewhere along the line, it was kind of bringing back to me all of the things that were difficult about postpartum and the things that, could be easier with the right support, and kind of, brought it all to light that maybe I could help other moms out there make it a little easier for them, make the transition easier, and help them find the balance that I was kind of in the process of finding.
What was it like for you to be like in such a pivotal moment of your nursing trajectory, right? So going through this nurse coach training while also navigating your motherhood journey?
It was busy. So I had my first daughter was in full-time daycare. My role was like 4/10s during the week. And so I had one weekday off a week that I could kind of spend focusing on the program and the course and my coaching hours. And then as I finished the program, trying to kind of figure out like what I want to do. I did officially started my private practice before I had my second kiddo, but like barely kind of thing. So it was busy. So I was kind of working, 5 days a week, like, 50-hour type of weeks, trying to like finish all the coursework and kind of get things going before I knew that I was going to have to kind of take that pause and take a step back for several months. It works out really well for me because it kind of created that natural changing point for me. I think I kind of knew it all along, but I was like, should I step back, or like, can I do this where I'm still working full time and really try to get my coaching business going? But ultimately I was like, no, I can't do both and make it work. And so I used basically maternity leave as the changing point for me. It was kind of in the middle, like after the first couple months, that I was like, it's time. I need to just step back, especially having been the manager. I was like, I can't do a whole nother thing if I'm the manager of a department. So of course I stepped down from that role, and then I stepped down from full-time to PRN. And that was like a huge blessing that I was able to do that, we could make it work, like financially speaking, of course, while I was trying to, get the gears turning, and was able to kind of give the coaching a little bit more time.
Yeah. And I think there's an interesting distinction there between I can't, like what I literally can't do, versus like what I just don't want to be doing right now, and listening, because we have quite a few nurses who go through this program who like you, like me, right? You're coming into a nurse coach training while working full time, while managing a family that already exists. And then many go on to create their new direction as a nurse coach or set up a private practice while still working a full time, right? It can be done. And where nurses are very successful in maintaining both is when they really want to, is when they're like, oh, my heart is in continuing to work 3 days in the ICU, or my heart is in continuing to work full-time in management. But what I'm hearing from you is that part of that feeling of like, I can't do this, I can't do both of these roles, was also that pair of like, I don't really want to be doing this. I'm stepping into a different chapter of my life, into a different chapter of motherhood, where my time and my energy are going to need to be reprioritized in a different way. So where do I want my professional energy going? Do I want it all going into this management role and hospital system that I'm finding over time I don't totally align with? Or do I want it to go into this, new, perhaps scary endeavor that all the pieces aren't quite lined up yet, but where I'm feeling my heart called to? Does that resonate?
Yes, 1000%. And I think you nailed it with like the part about energy, like that you only have so much energy that you can spend. And if you're spending it all on hospital management, there's not enough left to actually put into the business. And then there's the time aspect too. Like both of those are kind of finite resources. And also being a young mom and pregnant, it was just like you're burning the candle at every point along it, not just on both ends, the whole thing. If I hadn't been pregnant and like about to deliver and having this natural pause, I probably wouldn't have like stepped back as soon as I did, because I would have wanted, a little bit more, confidence that I could make it work, and, like all the financial piece of it. But, in the position that I was in, I said, if I don't do this now, if I go back as a full-time manager and still trying to start my own business, like what is going to be the impetus that makes me make this change, if not this?
Yeah.
It was great timing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That is a conversation that Peter and I have been having ourselves, of like now entering into this new season of life, and like some things need to shift. They just naturally, now you bring a new human into the world, you become a more divided human, and you have to spread your time and your resources differently. Being very intentional of like, okay, if this is going to be a pivotal moment, in what ways do we want it to be pivotal? In what ways do we want to pivot, right? And then what do we want to intentionally shift here? Do you think that's like, is that a theme of the new moms that you support? Like, are they tend to be using that time of stepping into motherhood in the postpartum period, kind of like redefine self or reshape direction in some way?
Yes. A lot of what we had just talked about, I've talked about with my clients about like time and energy and spending it on like what matters. I was literally leading a webinar and 2 hours ago that was talking about like the shift in your identity and how life, changes and we adapt. And, not every mom that I coach is going to say, oh, if I want balance, I'm going to quit my own job and start a business. Like that's what I did. And that, like, for personal reasons, that it's part of why I wanted to become a nurse coach, for the flexibility and the freedom. But that's not, true for everybody. So I'm not here trying to convince people to quit their jobs or anything, but, kind of looking at myself in the mirror of like, am I like, taking my own medicine, that kind of thing, and B, like, am I living in alignment with what I'm like teaching other people, or not teaching, but like leading other people to find in their own lives. I try to kind of emulate that and help people find that, because we're all just trying to find the right balance and what works for our own lives.
So what does a day in the life look like for you as a business owner, with your practice as a nurse coach, plus being a mom of 2 girls under 3, 4? Like, what does a day in the life look like for you to have that balance that you've intentionally designed for yourself?
Up until very recently, I was still working PRN in the hospital, and I really liked that. I would work like 1 or 2 days a week because I was no longer the manager, so I didn't have to do all the higher up things. I just got to be the nurse. But it kind of brought that spark back into it, like having the training from the collective, and then also just not the like burden of being the full-time staff member. So it made me enjoy my hospital job more. But we actually just moved cross country. So that's why I'm not currently working a PRN job, because I haven't gotten there yet. And so right now I'm focusing just on my business, and I'm still debating getting a PRN job just for the camaraderie and that kind of thing, being in a new space. But for now, we actually have an au pair, so I don't have to do daycare drop off, which is incredible. She takes over kind of first thing in the morning and takes the girls. And then I have an office at the house where I do my one-on-one calls, but I try to not just be locked in the office all day. I try to, anytime I can, like take a call, or if I need to listen to something, try to do it while I'm like walking the dog out in the neighborhood. If I'm just doing like outreach, like, trying to introduce myself to new potential clients, I'll do that on the back patio. So just kind of being fluid about where I am. But the things that fill up my day the most are the calls themselves and the follow-up, either like sending notes, that kind of thing, any, follow-up that the client needs, and then doing creating content for webinars, for social media, that kind of thing. Doing outreach, like trying to get myself plugged in the community, either with like groups that, where I might find other moms with other practitioners, that kind of thing. Just building that network, making those connections. And that's kind of, the bulk of what I do day to day.
So you are a mom, you are a nurse, you are a coach, you are involved in your community, you are working on finding all of these ways to take care of and nourish and support the population that you serve inside of your practice, while also figuring out these ways to do that for yourself. And I really like the way you touched on that. Sometimes people think the dream life is as simple as having your own practice and having your own clients and having your office where you get to work from home and define your schedule. And like, yep, that's a big part of it. And that can be really hard too, because being in the box of your own home office where life and kids laughing or sometimes crying outside the door, right, are happening around you. Like, it can still be hard to be in the work world, and it can still begin to feel like work. So what I'm hearing you say is there are all of these little ways throughout the day to be practicing what you preach, right? Getting out and going for a walk, to whether you're taking your clients or you have something to listen to, going to utilize the patio. I say that as I'm looking outside and pointing to my patio. I don't know if you do this or if it is an interruption to your day. One of my favorite interruptions to my day is like every time I leave my office to go refill my water and get more tea, that's like my intentional break. It's hanging out with my kid. Like it's like this really cool. I don't know how your toddlers are, but also my toddler doesn't exactly let me walk in and out of a room like quickly. It's not a high buy experience, but so that's great for me because then I get to plan my days around, okay, this is the hour I'm going to go in and really powerfully serve my client or serve my community. And then I'm going to go take my 15-minute break, and it's not going to be that boring sit in a corner, shove food down my throat break that I used to take from the ICU. It's going to be this really lovely, like, reconnect to my purpose as a mom and a human being and get my cup filled before I come back in. What is it like for you working from home and then having your au pair and having your kids and family right there?
It's mostly what you just said. It's nice to kind of like tie it back into the why of like, why do I want a more flexible life? And I kind of joke with people that like, it's great that my kids are at home all day long, but also my kids are home all day. Like sometimes they're giggling around the corner and sometimes they're screaming around the corner. But for the most part, I love like, not being completely separated from them for like, 8 or 10 hours a day and getting those like little micro moments, with my kids or my dog, or just like be in my own kitchen or throw a load of laundry in the house, like or in the wash. It's just nice to have those like smaller moments when you are home. But like you said, it can be, if you let it, it can be like I'm in my office all day long kind of thing. That's why I said I try to, shake it up a little bit. And sometimes I'll, go to a coffee shop or go to the library to like change the scenery, or, if I do need a little separation from the little ones for a minute, I can always do that, so that it is nice to kind of have that fluidity.
Yeah, absolutely. Aside from sometimes the challenge of sharing your like home work space with kids, what do you think have been some of the biggest challenges for you of like being a mom of two and being a nurse coach entrepreneur?
At the beginning, when Ava, she's my littlest, when she was still little, I was still nursing. And so a lot of that was just juggling. I need to feed her, but like I need to be professional and on camera. And, we didn't have the au pair right away. It was kind of just juggling the logistics of it a bit that was tricky. And some of it too is like defining those boundaries. Like it's not like I get in my car, I drive to work, I'm at work, and then I come home. It's can get very blurry and very fuzzy if you aren't diligent. So the kind of challenge is like that you have to be, very intentional with your time, because otherwise it's not like, oh, my patient just arrived, now I have to start doing this work with this patient. There's not that clear definition of like what you're doing. And so you could get lost in social media for 2 hours if you get distracted. And so just being intentional with your time, you have to have the structure and you have to instill that upon yourself.
Something really sweet that I have started doing is I noticed that I got into this cycle of like every time I would come into my office, I would say, okay, mama's got to go to work now. And magically, it's just, he just accepts it. He's like, okay, mama goes to work. And I envisioned he was constantly going to be knocking on the door or running in. And now that he's learned how to open doors himself, but he's very respectful of the zone. And I started to shift my language and like try new things of, instead of always saying like, mama's got to go to work, is oh, mama's got to go work on a project that I'm really passionate about, or mama's going to go help people right now, right? So like reframing it in a way, and then when I see him translate that back to me as like, yay, mama wants to help people, I'm like, cool, okay, now I don't feel sad about leaving you for the rest of the day now and going to work, even though I love my work, but it like reminds me that I love my work, and I get to translate that to him in this really cool way. I just started doing this like a couple of weeks ago. I don't know why it took me 2.5 years ago to come up with the idea to change my language, but here we are.
And it sets the example, and it sets the like precedent that like, mom, it's not just like this vague general mom's going to work, but like what is she actually doing, and like actually getting a little bit more like nitty-gritty on what you are doing, and how cool that mom does this stuff that she's passionate about. That in itself kind of ties you back into your why of like setting that example and showing him that mom is this like awesome like business owner and she helps other people. And I think that's amazing. And I actually like very recently was like kind of in the same vein, like, why don't I be more specific about like what I do? Like, why do I have to wait until she's 8 years old to tell her what I do? Like, why can't I just tell her when she's 3? You're already getting a little more specific too about like, what am I actually doing when I go to work?
Cool. Okay. So break it down for me. Like what do you say? How do you explain what you do to a 3-year-old?
It's a great way to put it. So I told her, do you know what mommy does for work? I said, I help other mommies. I help them take care of themselves so that we have the energy and we have the spice and the spark to take care of you guys, because you guys love feeding off of our energy. And so I help moms create that energy for their babies.
That's like a cool side part of your practice, is not only teaching moms how to do that, but then teaching moms how to communicate that with their kids in a way that their kids can get excited about that. Because what kid, even I'm just thinking of my son being not yet 2.5, but even at his age, like if I tell him, hey, I'm going to do this thing and then I'm going to have more energy because you have a lot of energy, he's going to be like, let's go. Like, yes, go do that thing. And then let's go stomp around like dinosaurs. That. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I love that analogy. And I was talking to somebody the other day about like the guilt that a lot of moms have of like, well, I want to do XYZ, but I feel bad. Like I want to be with my baby and I want to see them and snuggle them. And I feel bad not being with them and doing something else for me instead of something for them. I challenge that concept that doing something for you isn't selfish. It actually makes you a better mom. That
fits in really obviously with your population. Like I think theoretically we can all get down with that concept of like, when we are taking care of ourselves, obviously I'm going to be better able to show up for my children and for my family. It's also a really important reminder inside of the entire nurse coaching journey that we try to remind you, me, our fellow nurses of every single day in becoming a nurse coach. And people wonder, do I have to be perfect? Do I have to be totally healthy and well? Do I have to have all my own life and shit together? And the answer, of course, is no. You don't have to have it all together, but we do get to reframe this idea that the idea of being healers is not to give and give and give until our cup is depleted, and then we just keep giving and giving and giving, because that ends in total burnout and total destruction. But instead, when we do take time for ourselves, when we do care for ourselves, it's not selfish. It's actually literally the least selfish thing we can do, because it means we get to then be that much better of a healer or a nurse or human, no matter what setting that we're in.
Yeah. And I think you and I talked about this the last time we met, about so many similarities about being a mother and being a nurse, because they're both caregivers. And it's like you could be describing one or the other, but if you give and give and give, then you end up quitting your job, or just like taking it out on your family, or whatever the like backlash looks like. It's easy if you take it too far, if you're not taking care of yourself, to kind of let it out on the people around you.
And that's interesting. It goes back to like the first question that I asked you, which was, okay, you have your population and your practice of working with these new moms. And I asked, is that a population that you also worked with as a nurse? And you're like, no, but it's a population that I live and breathe and am. But also, if we take away the demographic of it, like, yes, the caretaker of it, the being that provider and that nurturer, that's nursing. Like, you've been doing that for your whole professional career. So it is a real smooth transition there. Yeah, I like that parallel a lot. How do you think that becoming a nurse coach has helped you become a better mom?
It's hard to say how it didn't, because it's completely like upended my whole life. Like, if I look back at my life 2+ years ago, it was go to the hospital, clock in, clock out, do your job. My marriage has never been like, in any kind of like disarray or anything, but at some moments we've been more connected and less connected. And so like going through the collective and kind of having the like homework of, each module that we were learning and coaching other people really helped us, I think, because it kind of like, hey, look in the mirror, like, how are you guys communicating with each other, and how are you taking care of yourself as a human? And so it improved the relationships around me, not just my husband, but it made me more intentional with my friends. And it's also been like kind of divine timing, because a lot of my friends, like since I started the postpartum aspect, like a lot of them have gotten pregnant. And so I've been able to be like a good resource and support for them, and kind of like a good sounding board. There's just more ways than I can count, but it's deepened my relationships and strengthened them, and then also made me better at what I tell our moms to do, is just like taking care of myself and helping, like we did before the call started, like take a couple deep breaths and like resetting and finding those small moments to take a moment for you, even if it's literally a moment, and just being more intentional with how I like nourish myself. And, because we talked about that a lot in the collective of mindful eating and that kind of thing, and just taking care of yourself physically too. So I don't know, I feel like I could talk about that question for an hour, but those are some really, yeah.
I mean, I was having a similar conversation with a colleague the other day, and I was reflecting back on my years as an ICU nurse and saying, I will always be grateful for those years, because they gave me a very certain set of gifts, such as the ability to be with people in really awful, vulnerable moments, as well as insane levels of intellect and insight into the medical world. And unfortunately, inevitably, I know that at some point in life, myself and most of the people that I love are going to end up having certain connections being inside of the medical system. And I'm so grateful for my ICU days, because I know how to navigate that. But when I look at the gifts that nurse coaching has given me in terms of in the growth in intellect, the growth of relationships, the growth of myself as a human, and how I relate to the world and relate to the people that I love the most, I'm with you. It's like I could talk about that part forever, because I am not the same person who I was before I became a nurse coach. You have probably heard me say before to nurses, like, once you become a nurse coach, you can't unlearn. You can't unlearn what you've learned. You can't like rewind and go back, because you just learn to be different, to show up differently, to listen differently, to be present, to hold space, all of these different things. And then those little things impact truly every area of your life, every relationship that you have, from the one you have with yourself to your partner to your kids. So I could not agree with you more on that side. So with the new moms that you work with, what tend to be the biggest challenges that they're facing that you then have the opportunity to support them with? And partially this is a selfish question, because I'm like, prepare me for what's coming, and walk me through what I got to be particularly mindful of here.
Yes. Well, if you need any help, you know where to find me. What I find is like the biggest issue that people run into is just not having enough time. We can't do all of the things, and, make sure we're meal prepping everything for the family, and that we're going to the gym every day, and that, we spend some time with the kids and get them down for bed on their, like their whole bedtime routine, and then still, have hobbies, and like you can't do it all. And so I help moms to kind of reprioritize like what matters the most to you, because if you have to make time for something, you will. There was something that we talked about, I think, early in the collective that was like, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll be forced to make time for your illness. And so that's kind of like the gist of what I'm getting is like, if you don't make the priorities, like you're going to be forced to, right? But helping them figure out the ways that they can, being realistic about like, I am a young mother and I do have a job, or I don't, and I am at home all day, but I still can't find the time because I have the kids with me all the time. So no matter if they're stay at home or working, time is always the biggest factor. So helping them figure out how to fit things in, but also just finding the balance, because you can't work out every morning before you hang out with your kids all day, but then also get 8 hours of sleep. Like you can't do both things. And so finding what works for them, like maybe I try to get some exercise in like 3 days a week. And then maybe on those days, that means I don't sleep quite as much. And so on the other days, I fill my cup by sleeping a little bit more. And so finding that balance that works with their schedule, with their spouses, with their kids and their kids' schedules. And then the other part is the mindset shifts of, I don't deserve to take breaks, or I feel guilty if I take breaks, or there's more to it. It's kind of just like all up in my head, like the mental like part of it and the keeping track of everything and that aspect. And so some of what I do has nothing to do with logistics and has everything to do with how you view your role as a mother, how you are viewed in your own family, and how can we make little changes and little shifts within the family and within your, like how you view yourself to make things work.
Yeah, I think that's such a important distinction. And actually, no matter what population you work with, right? There's always going to be those two sides of things, which is all the tangible areas that we really get to help people with as nurse coaches in terms of reprioritization and setting the right goals and taking the right actions and making sure that tangible plan is something that's going to set people up for success and for betterment. But then on the flip side, there's also this huge mindset shift piece. And it's like one really cannot exist without the other. That's a great point there. Peter and I have a phrase that we remind each other of a lot, which is that you can do anything you want, but you can't do everything. At least not all at once. So when we get stuck in that feeling of like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to, go have all of my amazing women entrepreneur friends, but then I want to be home all the time with my kid, but then I want to focus on my business, right? So there's all these things. And remembering, like, as an empowered human being and having choice and autonomy, I can do anything I want. I can go be with these amazing women in my life. I can focus on my business. I can spend all of my time with my kid, but I can't do everything all at the same time. And that's just like this ongoing human challenge of like, we want so many things and we want to do it all at once. And quite often it really does take that external person, such as a nurse coach, to help us have the important conversations to figure out, well, if I can't have everything all at once, but I can have any of those individual things, how do I break it down? How do I prioritize? How do I shift my mindset? How do I shift my calendar, right? All of these different things to make it fit. This is giving me a lot to think about, Ellen, because I know I'm about to enter like a season of my life where I get the opportunity to like pivot and use it as a like literal rebirth of self and reprioritization. And part of that is going to just be a necessity, but part of it does get to be that choice. So again, feels like a super timely conversation to get to have with you.
Yes, I love that. And I'm so excited for you and your next chapter.
I have one more question for you that I think maybe nurses who are thinking about starting their own business, they tend to have a lot. So, and I'm going to focus on your population because a new mom is already stretched for time, as you said, stretched for resources often, whether that is energy or financially, right? We're adding this new being that we have to care for. So a question or a doubt that tends to come up then is like, who would pay for this? Who would sign up for this at a time in your life when you're already stretched? Is it really possible that there are moms out there who are going to invest in this? And yet I know that you've shared with me that you've got your clients, you are able to charge around $2,000 for that 3-month coaching practice. What do you say to that nurse who's wondering, like, is anybody really willing to pay for this? And why would a mom choose to make this investment?
That's a great question, and one that I was asking at the beginning. And I actually had trouble capturing the initial postpartum moms. It was an issue of timing. Like you said, they're just so busy and doing so many things. An issue, like it's a finite period of time when you're so fresh. And then there's a financial piece, like you are caring for another human being, and you also probably have a hospital bill you have to pay. And so I did pivot a little bit from working with that like fresh postpartum. And so most of my clients are actually a little bit further out. I find that most of the moms that I work with are around the like year postpartum, because there's a little bit more brain space that they can like allow themselves to like think about these kind of things. I was initially working with more like with those fresh moms of like, how do you find enough sleep that you can function as a human being? And how can you eat breakfast when you're holding a newborn? And, we were going through some of the more like basic things. What I found that A, that people were actually investing in, and B, that I enjoyed was a little bit further on in the postpartum journey. Because postpartum does not end at 6 weeks. We all know that at this point. It continues on for years. It's basically the rest of your life. You're officially in the postpartum
Truly
phase of your life. Yeah. Working with those moms that kind of have their groove, but they need to iron out some kinks. And because I love having those conversations about like, how do you want to show up as a mom and like show up for your kids, and what example, what person do you want them to remember you as? Do you want them to remember you as the mom that like, always had, dinner on the table every night, or as the mom that had a dance party with them at dinner every night? Like those little things that like, how can you bring like the spark and the spice back into, what might be something kind of mundane, or it might be like the most amazing thing ever, but it's still fun to like have those conversations and to like kind of tie things all together. So everybody's journey is a little bit different, but that's why I ended up working a little bit further out, because I just found it was easier, and I was just getting more clients that way, as opposed to the moms that were like so fresh, just because it is it's a very raw time.
Adding another thing to the list of another thing to do or another thing to pay for, it feels insurmountable. But when you frame it like you just did, which is like really asking yourself those questions that are so important, right? What kind of mom do you want to be? How do you want your kids to know you and remember you and think back on their childhood? Like those questions are priceless, right? So when you can translate that as being, hey, the value of what I'm offering as a nurse coach is not just that I'm helping you through this challenging time and we're helping prioritize your wellness. It goes so much bigger than that, of like recreating your identity and your relationship. Then it becomes a no-brainer to me of why somebody who's in that moment in life would want to invest in their time, their energy, their resources, even at such a precious moment in life, to working with you and to having your support.
Exactly.
Awesome, Ellen. Well, I am so glad that we were able to connect, especially just selfishly for me at this point. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm gonna have to go do some journaling and some self-coaching and write down my priorities. And the phrase you keep saying is spark and spice. Bring the spark and bring the spice. And I'm like, ooh, I don't really use either of those words in my vocabulary, they're not part of what I tend to think to say, and I love them both. So now I'm thinking like, I'm getting ready, and I'm like, ooh, okay, Kai is my son. I'm like, okay, Kai, how can I bring more spark, more spice? Like, get ready. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to come up with something creative for you.
I love it. I can't wait to see what that looks like for you.
Awesome. Ellen, well, thank you so much for joining me today, and have a great rest of your week.
All right. Thanks, Heather. See you.